Hey Insiders, Jeremy McCarthy on the podcast today for one of my favorite conversations yet. Not only has Jeremy led hospitality for Mandarin Oriental, Four Seasons, and other top hospitality properties, he has an extensive background in positive psychology. Today we're going to talk about psychological hacks and missteps that spas should be aware of if they want to create the highest perceived value for their services. So excited for you guys to listen to this one. Jeremy, I am so happy to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for taking time to join us.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this. I think this is a great opportunity to talk about the world of spa.
That is a world you know well. I feel like you've got such a unique perspective in this industry. You started out, worked in Four Seasons as a lifeguard, right?
That was my first hotel job, yeah.
And that's while you were pursuing a psychology degree.
Correct.
And then 5 years later, you were architecting global experiences for Four Seasons, helping shape spas around the world. And if I'm correct, you were the person that was opening all these new spas. Your fingerprints were all over all these new locations around the globe.
Well, I remember at the beginning when I opened my first spa at the Four Seasons Santa Barbara, I told the vice president of operations that I wanted a career in spa. And he said, there's no career in spa. If you want to work in the hotel business, you have to go into either rooms or food and beverage. And I said, well, I'm not interested in rooms division or food and beverage, so I'm just going to keep doing this until something better comes along. And that turned into 14 years with Four Seasons, moving around and working at different spas in the group.
What gave you such a strong affinity to spa?
I think it partly was from my academic background in psychology. When I got into this luxury hotel where you're having to deal with a very discerning and demanding clientele, and my first time becoming a supervisor and a manager and having to lead a team of people, I just felt like every day I was practicing psychology, working with people in our business. And the spa industry is so great because you get to go into work every day and you're really just helping people to feel and be at their best. I just love that about the industry and always enjoyed it.
I am so glad that you made that decision to stick with spa, because that unique confluence of a passion for guest experience and a passion for how humans perceive things and how the mind works allowed you to create a blueprint and a recipe that you use to architect these amazing experiences around the world, first at Four Seasons and then at Mandarin Oriental. You have written a phenomenal book that gives away that recipe for people that are interested and rigorously backs it up with citations and studies so that it is very grounded. What motivated you to give away that secret sauce that you uniquely had?
Well, that book was actually my capstone project when I went back to school to get my master's degree in applied positive psychology at University of Pennsylvania. So I had spent a couple of years researching and trying to understand what is the psychology of a spa experience. I just kind of realized that even though the spa industry has always said that spa is about mind, body, and spirit, the industry tends to talk about the physical aspects of the experience. The facilities that we build and the ingredients in the products that we use and the techniques that our therapists use. It's all about the physical part. So when I began studying the psychology of the experience, I realized the impact of spa is really first and foremost a psychological experience, a psychological impact that we're making. And if there's things that we can learn from the psychology research that has been done that would help us to deliver better experiences, then yeah, I just wanted to capture all of that on paper. And I always am willing to share my ideas about things we're doing in spa and how we can do it better.
I love that. For the folks listening at home, I want to underscore that the program that Jeremy's talking about, that was studying with the godfather of positive psychology. UPenn is where groundbreaking work was being done to reframe psychology in a way parallel between allopathic medicine and wellness, where psychology was focused on treating disorders and all this negativity. And the work being done at UPenn was around reframing that to how do we optimize for happiness and success and health. So the fact that you were a participant in that, not only have you been party to a very high level in the hospitality industry, but that is really cutting edge psychology as well.
You know, spa lives on the positive end of the health spectrum. Spas are one of the only healing institutions in modern life that people actually look forward to going to, that people enjoy when they're there, and that people remember fondly afterward. Most of our health institutions, even though presumably they're designed to make us feel better, we dread going to have any kind of health experience and other aspects of healthcare. Much in a similar way that positive psychology looked at the positive end of the spectrum of mental health, spas have lived in that positive spectrum as well. So there's a real synergy with the thinking behind positive psychology.
What strikes me is that that's almost been done accidentally. As you are now quantifying what it means to architect these experiences that are triggering psychological responses intentionally, what do you find that most spas get wrong about applying these psychological principles to the guest experience?
First, let me say what I think most spas get right, because I think what happens in the treatment room in most spas is really beneficial to people. The main premise of my book was that a lot of the benefit of spa comes from you go to a beautiful place which is designed to be very soothing and calming and comfortable. That creates a great environment for healing and recovery. You separate yourself from technology. You spend an hour where you're just in silence, allowing your mind to rest. And you put yourself in the hands of a nurturing healer. Before the therapist even pulls out their oils or does their technique, those three things create an incredible environment for a psychologically healing experience. Where spas need to think a little bit more is how do you create the journey? Because typically what happens is the spa guest comes rushing in. They had to call their boss. They had to deal with emails like literally while they're walking in the door of the spa. They were stuck in traffic. They're carrying all of this stress of the outside world with them. And if you just try to jam them right into the treatment room without having some kind of a ritual or some kind of a journey to help take them to a good place where they can really receive the benefit of that treatment, then it can be problematic.
You're like fight or flight on the massage table.
Yeah, exactly. If I use Mandarin Oriental as an example, there's a series of steps that we go through. And one of the first things we do is we ask them to remove their shoes and we give them spa slippers. So before they've even checked in, we take their shoes. Much like you often do in Asian culture, you're removing your shoes, which are a part of the outside world, and you're saying, okay, those are going to stay here. Now you're taking a journey into this sanctuary of calm and peace. Then we serve them a hot cup of tea, so you can't drink it quickly because it's hot. You have to start to slow down, allow your mind to settle. Then we take you into the locker room. You change into a robe. Now you're really shedding off your armor from the battles you've been confronting in the outside world and going deeper into that space of relaxation. You then might have a bathing ritual where you're going through heat and water experiences. So by the time you get into the treatment room, you're already a few levels along on your journey and really ready to receive the benefits of that treatment.
So what's happening in the neurology of the guest? Is they're going along that continuum?
In those moments of that ritual, you're giving the mind a chance to settle, as most of us are on information overload constantly. We're processing more information than we ever have before. It's very rare in modern world that we have a place where we go where we just put our phone away and allow the mind to settle. It doesn't always mean that you're just instantly going into a state of relaxation. A lot of times it means that you're processing things that you haven't given your mind a chance to process. One thing that I always find when I go to the spa is I'll get incredible insights while I'm on the treatment table. My mind will suddenly find a solution to a problem I've been confronting, or I'll come up with a great idea. A lot of times I rush out from the spa treatment room and I just want to write some notes because that's the first time, maybe in a week or in a month, where I have given my mind that space to just be calm. When you take someone who is always on, always connected, always going very fast paced, and you take them into a spa, you take their phone away, you invite them into a beautiful, comfortable space, and you turn the lights down and they're just lying there in silence for an hour, even without the therapist putting their hands on them yet, you've already given them a chance to have that meditative experience, that separation from all of the noise that's normally coming in.
Is there an amount of time that the nervous system takes to downregulate?
It really depends on what's going on with each individual person and what they're carrying with them. So we did some research on rapport, like what are the factors that help somebody when you meet someone for the first time and you just know you hit it off and you have a great relationship and you feel comfortable with that person. And essentially what we realize is that rapport is all about psychological safety. So when a therapist picks up their guest, their job in those first few minutes is to make that guest feel safe, that they're in good hands, they're going to be well taken care of, their privacy is going to be respected, boundaries are going to be respected, that the therapist is putting themselves in a relationship where it's very clear from the very beginning, we're here to look after you, we're here to make sure that you're comfortable, we're going to take care of you. If you create that safety, then that goes a long way in helping someone get to that place where they can really downregulate and have their autonomic system really functioning smoothly.
Is there specific language that you would train your therapist to use to create that as quickly as possible?
There is, but it's interesting because it's very culturally dependent. So it's not the same for every person, and you really have to learn how to recognize your guest and get to know who they are and what they're looking for. In Western cultures, usually the way that we build rapport is to create a friend vibe. If I'm picking up a guest, a therapist, in an American spa, I might typically put my hand on their shoulder like, hey, how are you doing today? I might be a little bit more casual than other employees in the hotel that might be more formal. I want to feel more relaxed. I might try to find common ground with you, like, oh, where are you from? Oh, you're from Tucson. I love Tucson. My sister lives there. So you find something in common that helps you to create this feeling of friendship. That's a Western way of establishing rapport. In Asian cultures, usually that won't be received as well because humility is really what is important. In an Asian culture, you want to show your guest that I respect that you are the guest. I am here to serve you. I am here as a humble servant to help you. So an Asian therapist will typically do things like bow when they meet you. They might very carefully guide the way to the treatment room and show you that they're looking after anything that might disrupt your experience, that they're thinking of you. They put the customer on a pedestal. In America, it's kind of like you're saying, hey, we're the same. Let's find ways that we're similar. In an Asian culture, it might be more like, no, I'm not putting myself on your level. I'm putting you up on a pedestal because you're my client and my job now is to take care of you for this time that we have together.
Very interesting. So is there any nuance with maybe Latin American cultures that spa owners in Florida or Texas or Arizona should be cognizant of?
Every culture is going to have its nuance. You really have to know your guests. Latin American cultures tend to be very warm, very friendly. I worked in Mexico for a while, and I remember I was surprised at how the employees every day come to work and immediately hug and kiss each other. That's a beautiful thing about the Latin American culture. That maybe allows a therapist to more quickly gain that kind of rapport with a guest because they're just very warm and open and friendly in those cultures.
So I'm curious about one thing before we move on. You're talking about how society, especially now, is bombarding us with information. Are there touch points after reception that spas can unintentionally feed too much stimuli or information to customers?
People are bringing their distractions with them, right? So people are coming in with their phones. So how do you really encourage a guest to put their phone aside and not feel like, well, while I'm waiting in the relaxation room, I want to be checking my messages or looking at my phone? You really want to give people that separation. So I think as much as you can shield them from the outside world and give them something positive and relaxing to focus on in those moments before their treatment, it's going to help.
How do you navigate the phone piece with guests where you're creating a boundary, but it doesn't feel offensive to the guest?
It's difficult. In my time with Mandarin Oriental, where we did a lot of digital detox programming, actually, we had a digital wellness treatment. We had digital wellness experiences that we gave to our guests. But we talked about, do we really want to mandate it and take a guest's phone away and force them to hand over their phone? We decided not to because every person is in a different experience. For some people, that might be more stressful, not having access or not being able to communicate with somebody that you need to communicate with. So we decided to let people pursue their own journey. But we did create like a cell phone sleeping bag that we could encourage people to put their phone in a sleeping bag while they're in the spa so they're not tempted to look at it.
So it's strongly encouraged.
Yeah.
Gotcha. What is one thing that a day spa or a solo operator might be able to do to make their services or experience for the guest more transformational?
I think really just thinking about the psychological journey that your guest is on. I had developed a spa concept earlier in my career for Westin hotels when I was with Starwood, called Heavenly Spa by Westin. A big part of that concept was we wanted to create a spa experience that was psychologically uplifting. So we just added little touch points. So for example, at the beginning of the treatment, we wanted to plant a positive seed to give that guest something positive to think about while they're in their treatment. So right before the treatment begins, we would show them 3 stones. One said hope, one said love, and one said gratitude. And we would just ask them, pick one of these stones, and that'll just give you a concept of what you want to focus on or what you want to think about while you're in your treatment. So instead of them ruminating about the meeting they had earlier that day with their boss, they're choosing to think about something they're grateful for, or they're choosing to think about somebody that they love.
For somebody at home that may listen to that and think, that sounds fluffy, what is that actually doing psychologically for the guest?
Well, there's all kinds of research on gratitude, hope, optimism. Psychology research shows us that as human beings, our natural tendency is to focus on the negative. And there's a reason for that. We survived by being alert to the threats in our environment. So we're all wired to continually analyze, focus, think about, and watch out for the negative things in our environment. And if you want to hack that system or overcome that natural bias, you need to work a little bit harder to imprint a positive message into your thinking. So the research shows that trying to tilt the scale a little bit more towards the positive, knowing that our brains are wired to tilt the other way if we just let them do their thing naturally, can really help people's well-being.
So just seeing those words can have a finger on the scale there?
Yeah, little touches like that. You've probably heard of the research on gratitude journals, where they've done studies showing that if at the end of every day you just write down 3 things that you are grateful for, that can make a difference in your overall well-being. There's research on the power of a smile and a nod. You know, you pass a stranger on the street, and in one group, 2 strangers pass, there's no interaction between them. In the other group, the strangers pass and one just smiles and makes eye contact as they go by. And then you measure their well-being after that experience. The people who had that small detail of a little positive interaction with another human being feel better. And they might not even know why they feel better, but those little details matter.
So if you're trying to differentiate your business and your service, there are all of these tiny high leverage moments where you can really create that positive environment for your guest if you're looking for them strategically.
This is what's so amazing about spa. There's nowhere else in the hotel where a guest spends 1 hour of uninterrupted quality time with one of our employees. So as great as the service might be in your restaurant or at your concierge desk, the opportunity to really impact someone in the spa is off the charts. We looked at research in Mandarin Oriental on emotional engagement with our guests. How emotionally engaged do guests feel as they go into different departments of the hotel? And we looked at that research for our hotels, but we also looked at our competitors. And what we saw was that the spa, both for Mandarin Oriental and for our competitors, had the highest emotional engagement of any department in the hotel. And it just makes sense because you're spending that quality time in such close proximity to another human being who's been trained and is there with a mission to make you feel your best.
So glad you said that. You wrote in your book that the mission of a good spa is not to make someone feel younger or look younger, it's to make them feel better.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
It goes back to what we were saying about positive health and positive psychology, that really in today's day and age where there's a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, we're all very busy, we're hyper-connected. What people really need is to alleviate some of that stress and to feel better about themselves. And spas just have an incredible opportunity to touch people in that way. We're touching people physically, but sometimes it's the emotional reaction that we get that makes the biggest impact.
I think expectation and perception are things that you're very cognizant of. Are there dimensions of the guest journey that a spa could start doing tomorrow to create an expectation that delivers a higher perceived value?
Yeah, I think it's just looking at your guest journey step by step. What are the little details everywhere along the way? To give another example, I talk about creating psychological safety. We have little details in our treatments of at what point in the journey does the therapist wash their hands before they touch the guest. I want our therapist to wash their hands as the last thing they do before they touch the guest, because I want the guest to hear the therapist washing their hands, because that creates safety. If the guest doesn't hear it, then the guest might wonder, has the therapist washed their hands? And now you've put a moment of doubt into your guest's mind that allows a negative thought to come in when they're supposed to be having this incredible, positive, relaxing experience. So it's really looking at every step of the way along the journey for those little details. And it doesn't have to be the same for every spa. I gave some examples from Mandarin Oriental where we have borrowed a lot of traditions from Asian cultures, and we've looked at that philosophy very closely. You can express your own personality as a brand and really think about how do you show up for your guests and create an environment that makes them feel cared for, that allows them to leave the outside world behind and really helps them to immerse themselves into the moment of that experience.
Are there touch points along that journey that you feel like spas miss an opportunity with?
A spa experience can be made or broken by what the receptionist said to them when they checked in. Were they greeted in the right way? Did they have to wait online to check in? Did they overhear an argument between a guest and the receptionist? Did the whole check-in experience take too long and now they feel like they're missing out on time from their experience? Because we have that negativity bias, any little hiccup that comes along the way can take someone out of the experience that you want to create for them. It really is about analyzing every detail of the journey, and every touch point that you have with that guest is an opportunity to help create that space for self-healing and relaxation, or to take someone out of that.
How about the inverse of that? When landing the plane at the end with the guest at checkout, are there things that people get right or wrong?
That's a very good question, because usually the last thing that we will ask the guest is, how was everything, right? The problem with that question is because we have a natural negativity bias. If you ask someone that question, the first thing they will think about is, what was the worst thing that happened? Because they know that you're asking to find out, did anything go wrong? Even when we ask that question, we're usually asking it from our own negativity bias of, we want to make sure there wasn't any problems that we need to be aware of. So we go, oh, how was everything? And the guest will immediately think about, well, the treatment room was kind of cold. Should I share that? Now, whether they decide to share it or not, the last thing before they leave the spa, they're now thinking the treatment room was too cold. What I like to ask people as they're leaving the spa is, what was your favorite part of the experience? What did you really enjoy about the spa today? So you immediately get the guest to think about, as the last thing they do before they leave, what was their favorite part? What was the most positive part of the experience? And then hopefully that's what they're going to remember when they think back on the spa and want to come back for their next appointment.
How do you give the guest permission to vocalize if there was some element of the service that wasn't up to standard so you can recover without planting that seed of negativity?
It's, again, the psychological safety that you create. So if you're creating good rapport with that guest, if they feel safe, they feel open, you've shown them repeatedly through every step of the journey that you are there to look after their needs and that you're attentive to their needs, then hopefully you create that environment where they feel comfortable to tell you if anything is going wrong.
So that's not a checklist item. It's you're earning that upstream in the journey.
Yeah. And every step of the way, the therapist is checking in. How's the pressure? How's the temperature? How's the music? You're checking in at every point along the journey to make sure that things are going well.
I know we're approaching the end of our time together. You mentioned longevity, biohacking. Those are all very big things. For spas that are doing things that are having measurable impact on guests, is there some research or a nugget of what you have found through writing your book that spa can speak to in order for them to get credit for what they're actually doing versus allowing the guest to leave and them potentially not connecting the dot between the psychological state that they have been very strategically primed into.
The metric that I think is the most interesting for spas is heart rate variability. And a lot of people now are tracking this on their own devices. Heart rate variability is basically a measure of your autonomic nervous system and how well is it functioning. How much are you in fight or flight, or are you in a state of calm and readiness? There's no real research yet on the impact of a spa on heart rate variability, but I think that would be something that you could try to look at to see the effect of people coming into the spa, if they're tracking their heart rate variability, or if you are one of these more longevity-oriented clinics that is measuring a lot of biomarkers of health on your guests, then you could be looking at heart rate variability as guests are coming in and going out, or as guests are receiving a series of treatments, and seeing whether you're making an impact on the autonomic nervous system.
That's really interesting. So final question, in your career, who has been the mentor that has made the deepest impact on you?
Whenever somebody asks me this question, I have 100 names that pop into my head because I've worked with so many incredible people in this industry and have influenced me over the years and that I have been inspired by over the years. So there was one conversation that I had that made a really big impact on my career, which was the travel correspondent Peter Greenberg. When I was working at the Four Seasons Resort in Maui, he came as a guest to the hotel. And I think at that time he was the travel correspondent for CBS News. And I asked him, how could my spa be featured on your show? And he said, oh, well, actually, it's very easy for you to get your spa on my show. All you have to do is do something that nobody else is doing, or do something better than everyone else is doing. And I thought about that, and I actually realized that even though we had this incredible, beautiful 5-star spa with amazing Hawaiian rituals and beautiful Hawaiian products, that actually we weren't really doing anything that I could say nobody else was doing. And we weren't really doing anything that I could say we're doing this better than anybody else. And I think that conversation is a lot of what led me to this research into psychology, was that quest for how can I look at spa a little bit differently than everybody else is looking at? How could I create a spa experience that's a little bit better than what everybody else is offering? And so those things really influenced and shaped how I have delivered experiences over the course of my career.
I love that. How did you run with that at Four Seasons Maui? Were you able to capture something that truly was singular?
So I went back to Four Seasons Maui. I worked there twice. And I was able to reinvent the spa and bring a lot of these more psychological components into it. One of the experiences that we created there was an aquacranial treatment, which was like a Watsu experience where the guest is floating in the water, but we would do it in the ocean. The amazing thing about that treatment is you would actually use the waves of the ocean as a part of the modality. So the guest would literally feel the waves running down their spine. It was an incredible, unique experience that nobody else was offering.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Phenomenal answer. I'm just really grateful that you spent some time with us.
Thanks, John.